There's a lot going on in Dominica that you need to know about. It's a small Caribbean island called the Jewel of the Caribbean. And today we bring you the first of a two-part series featuring a Caribbean nationalist and Dominican patriot, Gabriel Christian, and his son Makonnen Christian, who believe that the country is going in the wrong direction. That's up next on CaribNation. Hello, welcome to CaribNation. I'm Derrice Deane. Dominica, one of the jewels of the Eastern Caribbean, is in turmoil. The issue of investment by passport has created great public discourse as a result of a 60 Minutes program aired on January 1st, 2017. We at CaribNation wish to bring you all sides of the issue, those who believe that the country is going in the wrong direction, and the position of the government, who believe that they're doing the right thing. With me today in part one, we are dealing with the people who believe that the government is going in the wrong direction. And we have Gabriel Christian, an attorney in the Washington metropolitan area, and his son, Makonnen Christian, to talk about why they believe the government is going in the wrong direction. Dominica has been in the news for quite a while, but more prominently since January 1st, once a program was aired by 60 Minutes, showcasing their program of investment by passport. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of this program, when it started, and what has brought us to where we are today. Let me start with you, Gabriel, and I'll ask you to give me a little bit of a history about why did this idea of passports for investment start in the first place. I know it started in St. Kitts some 30 years ago, and it's been going on and off by different islands, more successful than others. But it's specifically, let's talk about Dominica.
Well, first of all, thank you, Doris. Thank you for CaribNation. Thank you, Makonnen, for being here, and our friend Larry Sinders, your director. So Dominica started this passport sales program, and let's call it that. As for the most part, that's what it has been in the 1990s when Eugenia Charles was prime minister. At that time, Hong Kong was acceding back to China. Hong Kong had been a British territory. And the belief was that the wealthy Hong Kong Chinese who didn't want to remain after China took over political control would see fit to maybe invest in rule of law, democratic country like Dominica, and Dominica would benefit from the foreign direct investment that the association would bring. That didn't amount to much, frankly, that we can see today. In fact, what is there is a weather-bitten hulk of concrete in the jungle in the Lai Valley of the famous Shangri-La Hotel, where Dominica faced the spectacle of all those passport monies disappearing into the hands of the unsavory, and the hotel never been built. So history has not been positive at all. The United Workers' Party of Edison James continued the program, and that's when issues even escalated. 66 Chinese were arrested at Lester Pearson Airport in Canada, all with the address of one minister, and Canada detained them. I believe they were deported. And Canada, which is a very close country, I actually went to junior high school at a Canadian-built school, the Goodwill Junior High School, which was built in '65. So Canada is very close to us. Canada imposed visa restrictions. Before that, Dominicans could just buy a plane ticket, like you buy a plane ticket to go to California or to go to Atlanta and go to Canada. They stopped it.
Now, Canada has done that with a couple of other
because of that reason, because of
yeah.
the threat to Canadian national security, because the Canadians are not fools. They know these are not real Dominicans. So Roosevelt Douglas, in his campaign for the Dominican Labour Party, used that incident under the United Workers' Party administration to say that when he became prime minister, he would stop it. Roosevelt Douglas, my dear friend and mentor, invited me to Dominica and asked me to be ambassador to the United States. And when I went to his office, there were passports from Moscow, Russian passports, Russian citizens on the desk of the departed prime minister. So he stopped it. He stopped the program. But he didn't last. He died after 8 months.
Yeah.
It now turns out that during that hiatus, Roosevelt Skerritt, the current prime minister, was doing backdoor deals with China to change from Taiwan, which is where Dominica was in diplomatic relations, to move to the PRC, People's Republic of China. And he continued the program, and it is in that context we've had now the scandal which manifested itself on international news with the 60 Minutes program, CBS 60 Minutes, on January 1st, 2017. However, inside of Dominica, the Dominican News Online by Dr. Thompson Fontaine, myself and others, we had actually spoken on WPFW 89.3 FM, Von Martin, the Caribbean experience. We had actually sought to alert the world to our concerns, because what was happening was, not only was the government selling passports, and in our view not giving a proper accounting, what they were also doing, they were placing diplomatic passports in the hands of the unsavory. And what, yes, and that is
we want to look at those two separately. We want to look at the citizenship for one thing,
yes,
and then we look a little deeper into how the diplomatic passport system came about.
Yes,
Before I get there, let me go to Makonnen. I want to get from you, thank you for joining us, by the way,
Thank you for having me.
Why is this of interest to you as the son of a Dominican?
Well, I guess I would be speaking on behalf of the concerned youth. Any government, at Dominica or abroad, should be concerned first and foremost with the well-being of their people. I believe selling diplomacy or citizenship puts Dominica at a great risk economically and, I guess, publicly. So when you, it's funny because there's actually a song made by, I cannot remember the artist at this time, but it's called Dominica Online. And in it, there's a lyric about how my prime minister is selling my country. When you sell something like citizenship, you're basically selling the worth, in a sense, of Dominica and its people. Exactly.
Because as citizens, that's something that is dear to us. That is our right, our birthright.
That's who we are.
And you are giving somebody else the freedom to claim that.
Simply for an exchange of money.
You've been to Dominica.
Yes, I have.
And so what does Dominica mean to you? Not only your future, but that heritage.
Well, to me, Dominica is a second home. I do live in the U.S. and I was born here in Maryland. But after my very first visit with my sister at the age of 6, she and I wrote this book, Our Visit to the Island.
Yes, I remember that. Yes. Yeah.
You had us on CaribNation earlier for it. So after our very first experience, it left quite the impression on both of us. First and foremost as the place of our parentage, and it's a great deal of where our culture comes from as well. Not only as Americans, but as Caribbean Americans, first generation. So we take it upon ourselves to embody that culture, and if we can, fight for Dominica whenever it might be in peril.
I'll come back to you to talk a little bit about how you think you can work, how you think you can do that.
Sure.
Gabriel, let me come back to you. Let's talk first about the citizenship program and the idea of investment, quote unquote. When we talk about investment, we're talking about large sums of money, and that is one of the triggers. I remember that's what first triggered my interest, that there were hundreds of thousands of dollars that were being asked. And I wonder whether we can understand the fact that for poor countries with limited resources, these are leaders who are trying to be creative, ingenious in their ways of finding resources, income for their country. There are many ways one can go about looking for funding, for money. So when you have countries that are bound by these limitations, you can understand the quest to find a way to make some money easily, I suppose one might say.
Well, Doris, let me just say this with all due respect. I respect what Antigua is trying to do. and what St. Kitts is trying to do, even what the Dominican government is trying to do in way of foreign direct investment. I have a total lack of sympathy for those who would use our nationality and the symbol of that nationality for their vile profiteering. The reality is on Dominica, after almost 14 years of Roosevelt's carrot as Prime Minister, there's zero social impact in way of any factory built, any farm built, any industry built.
So we don't know what this money has done.
Absolutely. What we do know is that he has been able to charter jet planes from the United States, 727s, to bring hundreds of Dominicans back to vote. We are saying that these monies are somehow not going to the areas of economic
development
that they are needed. Now, if we have a citizenship by investment program, the stress must be investment in factories, investment in laboratories
in the country.
That's correct. Investment in farms.
Not simply money given and we don't know.
We don't know where the money is going. So let me just say to you what happened. When the scandal broke, I wrote the Prime Minister a private email because I am the chairman of Rebuild Dominica, which was designed to restore our economy after the floods of 2015. We had criticized the government already, but that did not stop us because we are development activists. That didn't stop us from helping the Prime Minister, helping the government, helping the country. Because we are patriotic Dominicans. I said, Prime Minister, why are you in a situation where you have Alison Madueke? Last year I wrote you about that. The former Nigerian Minister of Oil. You appointed her secretly as a diplomat. And now 60 Minutes has exposed all of this to the world. I warned you about that. You know what he did? He attacked me and said that I was listening to opposition propaganda. This was all nonsense, hogwash. Then I went publicly and asked for a commission of inquiry. Sister Doris, commissions of inquiry are part of our tradition. We had the Moyne Commission in the 1930s after the labor riots to investigate the reasons why there were riots in Jamaica, in Guyana, in Barbados, in Grenada, Trinidad, and so on. His mastermind, his attorney, Anthony Astafan, attacked me as being an agent, a traitor, an enemy of the state is what his minister, Paul, called me. Why would you deny a commission of inquiry into something in public controversy, which is our tradition under a rule of law regime that we inherited from the British? British colonialism had its shortcomings, but I tell you more and more every day, I see the benefit of those systems, which allowed us to ensure probity in office. So when he refused to do that, as God would have it, what happened? On January 15th, 14 days after 60 Minutes, Interpol arrested Al-Reza Monfared, the Iranian agent who had embezzled $2.9 billion in skimming off the top from the sanctions-busting apparatus he had designed and been part of on behalf of the government of Iran. Skerritt and his crew had met that gentleman in Malaysia. Dominicans didn't know who he was. You have in your hand a plate that you can show to the camera. This is Al-Reza Monfared. On the left, this is him with the Prime Minister's lawyer, Alec Lawrence, and the director of the CBI in Malaysia in 2015. This gentleman was in Dominica after it had been known, or should have been known, that he was a fugitive from international justice. The United States wanted him. Iran was looking for him. The United States had already captured one of his accomplices on a trip to Florida, and Iran had already arrested one of his accomplices and had him convicted, and he is scheduled to be executed. This gentleman was in Dominica, unbeknownst to anyone that he was at that time a Dominican diplomat. After he was arrested is when the government, because Interpol disclosed that he had a Dominican diplomatic passport. Oh yes, we had appointed him a diplomat, but we had cancelled it. But we do not know that to be true. Why? Because when that appointment was made, the Dominican government did not put it in the Gazette, which is our tradition. But this is nothing new. He did the same thing with Alison Madueke. Look at the other plate. Alison Madueke, Nigerian Minister of Oil, accused of a $20 billion embezzlement scheme. She has already returned $153 million in cash to the Nigerian government. When Scotland Yard arrested her in England, they discovered that she was another Dominican diplomat. There's another one. You want to turn to Mr. Wu, the Chinese billionaire from Macau, arrested by the FBI in 2015, along with John Ash of Antigua, who was the Antiguan ambassador to the UN. Here is Prime Minister Skerritt cutting a cake in Macau, right around the time Dominica is being battered by that storm. When he leaves, John Ash is arrested by the FBI for money laundering and bribery. NG Lapsang is arrested with about $4.5 million in cash. Arrested by the FBI. When they are doing the bond hearing, we discover for the first time that he also is another Dominican diplomat. What is he doing for Dominica? Why has Roosevelt Skerritt time and time and time again sought to conceal, sought to deny, sought to cover up these appointments? If they were, I tell people all the time, if I met Mark Zuckerberg or I met Bill Gates or I met resurrected Albert Einstein and he said, look, Christian, I heard about Dominica. It's a nice island. I would like to set up an Institute of Higher Physics. Do you think I'd say no if that meant he would also have to become a citizen of Dominica? No, because education is the platform by which we can rise. None of these people are involved in building factories on Dominica. None of them are involved in building institutions of higher education on Dominica. None of them are involved in building model farms on Dominica. None of them are involved in building institutes for cybernetics and artificial intelligence in Dominica or IT. Things that China, for instance, has a great proficiency in. What China has is a huge embassy in Dominica, and it now has someone who's suspected of being a Chinese secret agent and a money launderer, secretly a Dominican ambassador.
The diplomatic passports then are used, or it is suspected that they are used, I should say, as avenues for money laundering more than anything else, you would think.
Sister Derrice, there's one more plate. Let's look for Francesco Corallo. The governor of Dominica, in 2011, thereabouts, appoints this guy as Dominica's ambassador to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. We do not know him to have one banana farm on Dominica. We do not know him to have one coffee plantation on Dominica. We do not know him to be an agriculturist or an agronomist. We do not know him to be someone who's written any learned treatise on agriculture in developing countries.
So what has he done at the UN?
Well, the Italian government rejected the application because he was under investigation for embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. And just recently he was arrested in St. Martin by police to be extradited to Italy for trial. Again, look at the caliber of the people. So is lightning just striking in the same place at the same time all the time? And then you say, oh, you did, what does the government say? Oh, we did due diligence. But when we ask them to do a commission of inquiry to really get to the meat of the matter, because we believe it will show that there were in fact payments, that's our high suspicion. We do not have the exact correlationship, although there's a letter going around that says one gentleman in Europe actually offered $100,000 to the Skerritt administration. The reality is these people have shamed us. They've placed our country as a direct threat to CARICOM's peace and stability, as a threat to U.S. national security and that of our traditional allies. And they have destroyed our standing in the international community that Dominicans in Defense of Democracy, the group that I'm part of, is sworn to try to rebuild and to refurbish once Prime Minister Skerritt does the right thing and resigns. Because in no law-abiding country would a prime minister enmeshed in such scandalous behavior where he's captain of that ship and that ship is always in association with criminal enterprise, would he be allowed to continue in office? Richard Nixon resigned over less.
The people of Dominica have been demanding, there have been protests in the streets, etc. But I'd like to go to a structural fault, I suppose one might call it, and that is vetting, where one would expect that if you're going to be giving something as precious as citizenship or diplomatic passports even to someone that there should be a vetting process whereby one is sure that this person lives up to the standards of the people of your country.
Can I answer the question this way? Makonnen, are you familiar with C-SPAN?
Yes, I am.
What's C-SPAN?
C-SPAN is a news station that we listen to quite often.
That's
and
right.
Usually deal with the global world news.
Of course, they also deal with public policy, folks on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And when someone is being appointed as an ambassador for the United States, do they have them on Capitol Hill?
They do.
And do they ask them questions?
Of course.
And why do they ask them questions, Makonnen?
It's to judge the character properly, of course. They wouldn't want to elect anyone who is unworthy.
And Republicans ask questions?
Sometimes, yes, they do.
And Democrats?
Of course.
And it's televised?
Yes, it
so
is.
the entire American population can see?
Of course.
That's what we want, and that's what's not happening. The secrecy in government, the concealing, the cover-up suggests the most foul things are going on. If, in fact, the government of Dominica was serious, was law-abiding, believed in rule of law, believed in democracy, believed in transparency, believed in accountability, they would have done exactly what Makonnen and I just had this little dialogue about, and which you know very well.
Well, by example, as a result of what has happened with Dominica, Antigua and St. Kitts have done their duty in trying to rectify their situations so that their vetting process is more stringent. And they have sought the assistance of outside, more sophisticated entities to be able to help them do this properly.
I think this government is acting reasonably. They have been placed under the limelight. They have a desire to help develop their country. They do not have a desire to destroy their country, and so they've responded. Antigua, I was told, has said it will conduct investigations. It is pulling back all diplomatic passports, and it's heightening scrutiny. Extreme vetting is what the term is. Dominica, on the other hand, Prime Minister Skerritt, instead of following in the path of those countries, is doubling down. Arrested Dr. Sam Christian on February 2nd, has arrested Dr. Fontaine, has arrested Johnson Boston, has arrested the Fulbright scholar, Claudia Sanford.
These are people who've been arrested simply because they are protesting.
They are protesting
what has happened.
They are calling for the resignation, and the government trumps up charges and says that Dr. Sam Christian made an incitement to arson to burn down the parliament 18 months ago. If you make an incitement to arson in public, you're arrested on the spot or shortly thereafter. Nothing happens. What he was talking about was the Reichstag fire, of how Adolf Hitler used the Reichstag fire to destroy his opposition and consolidate power. And that Dominicans had burned down the parliament before, and if the parliamentary speaker continues in that fashion of oppressing the opposition,
that is likely to happen again.
Then it is likely to happen again. That's a warning. It's like saying, if you hit me, I'll hit you back.
And they use that as a threat.
They use that, and they concocted a bogus charge against him, and that's when the protest really began. And Dr. Fontaine, arrested, released.
Now, he was arrested again because of what he allegedly stated.
Exactly. Well, they're saying what happened was on the 7th February, there was a massive protest in Roseau, the capital of Dominica, where the opposition actually is strong, asking for the government's resignation. That night, after the protest was over, stragglers around the truck were in contact with the police about where the truck should move. Shortly after that, younger people who got upset, I think, lit a fire in the street, and instead of going and talk to the people and just squelch it, they attacked them with canisters of tear gas, and the young people in Dominica just got, the government incited violence. They incited violence. They put the fire in town by the behavior of the police. They had snipers on the roof with machine guns. They had machine guns in the hands of their special service unit, and they attacked the stragglers, and Rosa went up in disorder, vandalism, and so forth, which we condemn because that's not what we want. Dominica is a peaceful, law-abiding country, but the Prime Minister and his government, they are lawless. They've associated with criminal enterprise, and that is why they have to go, because they can't run the country the way they've been doing it. That when people speak up for their rights in a rule of law society, they ought to be respected. They should not be arrested. We're saying for peace and order to reign, Prime Minister Skerritt, resign with your cabinet. Let us have CARICOM and other friendly countries help us mediate and enter this conflict, have a unity government, including the Labour Party, because the Labour Party has support in Dominica. I've been associated with the Labour Party. That's our roots. But we stand with people when they're right, and we part from them when they're wrong. And right now, this regime is corrupt, and it is lawless. With a unity government, we then can have a commission of inquiry presided over by a distinguished jurist from the Commonwealth or some other friendly country, with members of the opposition, government, and civil society. We can have electoral reform to ensure free and fair elections, so that the government cannot continue to use monies either from foreign aid or from passport sales or from its friends to pervert the cause of our electoral process by bringing in people to vote and giving them gratuity, which under our electoral laws is actually verboten. It's forbidden, it should not be done, but they do it all the time. That's what we want. So that's our bottom line demand.
In a nutshell, what you want is structure, rule of law, and certain tenets put in place to make sure that there is a check and balance system.
Absolutely.
Before we close, we have 2 minutes, and I want Makonnen to tell me, as a young person, and you've seen what happens in this country when people have disagreements about things. What do you think, from your experience of what you've observed, how do you think they can actively take a part in making these changes? And how would you want to help if you can?
Well, I think the most powerful tool that we have at our availability right now would be education. To educate yourself on these matters. A lot of people seem to be acting out in the streets. Of course, there was unfortunately rather unreasonable riot that happened in Roseau, if we're being honest. And I don't think that's necessarily the course of action that people should be taking. They should be taking it upon themselves to further inquire about the government and their actions and educate themselves on who exactly they've put in office and the actions they've taken since they've been in office. In order to prevent a situation like this from arising again, we must take it upon ourselves to, as you said, create a better vetting process, as our fellow countries have done who have also had this sort of same problem, so that we may put better officials in office and actually elect people who are working for their citizens, who are working for their country and its best interest and not only their own. Of course, there are going to be, a few who might
There'll
try.
always be.
Right, that's an unfortunate circumstance, but that's what comes with the territory. So, young people in Dominica, or those at least fighting for Dominica like myself, even though I'm not personally there, should take it upon themselves to know what the government is doing, to have
it's
them
about being informed,
right, and make sure the government has some sort of transparency, so that they may properly handle the situation.
Hold them to the fire, hold their feet to the fire.
Exactly.
Okay. One last statement. I think we have a few seconds left before we go. In terms of what's your next step? Well, because I want to be running out on time. I just want to get to.
Our next step. We have approached the folks in the Caribbean community, the Caribbean Diplomatic Corps, the U.S. government, Capitol Hill, the media, to bring the story to Dominica. We are working with civil society, the parliamentary opposition, the people in the Labour Party administration who quietly want this to end. We are working with them. We're working with those folks who are law-abiding police officers to make sure that we protect our institutions so we can see a transition that will allow for Dominica to return to peace and quiet. What we want for Dominica is peace and quiet so we can continue to build, and we can continue to build not only Dominica, but the wider Caribbean, to which we have a responsibility.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel Christian and Makonnen Christian. Thank you very much for helping us understand what has been happening and the background of what's been happening. I'm sure there's a lot more to come.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, CaribNation.
And thank you for joining us on CaribNation. Remember to stay tuned for part 2, when we will talk with a representative from the government to bring us their side of the issue. Until next time, I'm Derrice Deane.